One of our most faithful Value Voter Summit sponsors, who has partnered with us from the beginning to bring together this premier event for social conservatives, is American Values, led by its president, Gary Bauer. Gary served in President Ronald Reagan's administration for 8 years as Undersecretary of Education and Chief Domestic Policy Advisor in the White House. After leaving the Reagan White House, Gary became president of the Family Research Council and a senior vice president of Focus on the Family. Gary took his pro-family, pro-life message across the nation during the 2000 Republican presidential primary and the debates. Today, I serve alongside him on the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom. Gary, welcome back to the Values Voter Summit.
It's great to be with you at the summit. It's always great to be home at FRC. And let me just say this right away, Tony, you're doing a great job with FRC, putting it on the map, and couldn't be more proud of how you've made the organization grow.
Well, thank you, Gary. You laid a tremendous foundation for us. And I want to actually go back to that foundation because today, as we serve on the Commission on International Religious Freedom, China is at the forefront of national debate. We see this administration taking China on in a very aggressive way. But 25 years ago, when you were here at the Family Research Council, when we were entertaining this, the nation was entertaining the permanent most favored nation status for China from an economic standpoint, right. You issued a warning.
Well, I did. I still wake up in the middle of the night thinking about those days. Those were some huge fights. As you mentioned, Tony, for years, every year, the United States Congress had to vote on whether or not to give China most favored nation status on trade. And they hated that vote because the American people were kind of scratching their heads, why would we want to do that? But people on both the left in Congress and on the right, and then powerful organizations like the National Chamber of Commerce were very much in favor of most favored nation trading status for China. And they wanted to get this vote off the table. They wanted to make it permanent. And so for beginning in 1995 on up to 2000, there was a huge national debate about that. And there were some strange allies during that debate. Don't kick me out. I found myself on occasion standing with Nancy Pelosi, who at that time did not want to reward China, as well as some other well-known liberals.
She actually remains fairly good on the issue of China and religious freedom even today.
That is true, yes. In fact, we serve with one of her nominees to the commission, who is a really strong guy on the China issue. But during that debate, one of the things the Chamber of Commerce said, and quite frankly, a lot of free trade Republicans, many of whom I was friends with on a lot of different issues, was this idea that if we only traded more with China, it would change China. In fact, Tony, I don't know if you recall this, but one of those presidential debates I was in 2000, George W. Bush and I had an exchange about this. And when I have spare time on my hands, I go back and look at those things and dream of what could have been. But nonetheless, I sort of confronted George W. Bush about this. And he said, Gary, listen to me. If we will trade with the entrepreneurial class in China, it will help the Chinese people, it will help us, but more importantly, before you know it, Gary, freedom will come to China. Well, I'm still waiting. I was thinking about dropping a little note to the governor and asking him, is there an estimated time of arrival of that freedom? Tony, you and I have talked about this at USURF. What that trading with China did was sadly not change China. They're worse abusers of human rights now than ever before and of religious liberty. It's changed us. It made all kinds of businesses dependent on the Chinese market, and understandably, it made a lot of Americans dependent on cheap Chinese goods.
Well, let's take the NBA. Their alignment with China, their defense of China. Let's look at Hollywood, that has become really a puppet for communist China.
If anybody's got a young granddaughter or a daughter, the Mulan movie is a big deal. Everybody wants to see, all the kids want to see that movie. Well, there are a couple of problems there. The main actress is actually an apologist for communist China. She's defended their crackdown in Hong Kong. But even worse than that, at the end of the movie, they run the credits and they give thanks to people and organizations in China that cooperated in the making of the movie. And one of the entities they give thanks to is an entity that the United States government, the Trump administration, has put sanctions on. And it's essentially the police force in that particular province that's running these what the Chinese call re-education camps, but sure look a lot like the kind of things we saw in Germany in the 1930s.
Yeah, somewhere between 1 million and 2 million of the ethnic Uyghurs, mostly Muslim, are in these camps.
Yes.
And this administration, rightfully so, has focused on this atrocity, this human rights abuse, and as you made reference to, some of the businesses actually in America profiting from this slave labor. Now, fortunately, the Department of State and Homeland Security is cracking down on the importation of products made in those camps.
Yes.
But that's not the only place that China is abusing human rights and religious freedom.
They're trying to export this war on religion they conduct against their own people around the world. They've even tried to reach their long arm right here into the United States. When the Pence administration a couple of years ago put on the first major international meeting on religious liberty, the administration invited a lot of countries from around the world. There were some countries I think we probably didn't even bother to invite because we knew what the answer was. Many of those countries accepted. But then as the conference, the ministerial, this international meeting got closer to happening, we noticed that some countries were dropping out. And Secretary of State Pompeo has probably shared this with you. We found out that China was contacting the governments of those countries and saying, look, we have this big loan we made to you to help in your development in your country, and we could call that loan due right now if we wanted to. We would consider it a hostile act if you went and took part in this ministerial on religious liberty, which really is just another effort to condemn the honorable Chinese people. And sadly, a number of countries succumbed to that pressure.
So, Gary, when you look at all of the issues that we're facing in the United States today, you know, a pandemic, of course, that's thanks to communist China in large part.
Yes.
We've got economic downturn as a result of the reaction to the virus. We've got unrest in our streets. Major election coming up, vacancy on the Supreme Court. Why should Americans be concerned about communist China?
Well, it's a great question, Tony. Some of the things you mentioned are very immediate, and they are going to take our attention. If you're having challenges, you know, paying your mortgage, or you've got a loved one sick with this virus, you're going to be interested in what the president's doing and how we're handling it. By the way, I think he's done a great job. We'll debate that some other time, I guess, in the campaign. But the problem of communist China, in my view, this is an existential threat to the United States, and it won't be resolved in a day or a week or a year. This is probably a 50-year struggle, and I think before it's over, every country in the world is going to end up being pressured to choose the American model, which I think is best described as liberty under God, liberty that depends on a virtuous people. That was what our founders gave us, and what a lot of the Western world and Judeo-Christian civilization sort of is built on, has copied. Or the Chinese model, which is quite different, a model that says there can't be any higher thing that you look up to in your life other than the government. And Tony, I was always fairly confident, it's one of the reasons I loved Reagan, that we would win the struggle with the Soviet Union. I think the jury's out on communist China. And one of the main reasons is what we've already discussed, that their tentacles are in the United States. There are a lot of people that have gotten very rich doing business with communist China. President Trump, to his credit, has lanced that boil, but it's going to take a series of presidents, including him getting another term, to really be able to do all the things that have to be done to win this.
Which explains a lot of the resistance to President Trump, because he's not satisfied with the status quo, because the status quo will not make America great again.
It certainly won't. And he's been on, by the way, I went back in the 90s and looked at what Donald Trump was saying about China. He was warning about China back then, too. So this is nothing new.
Gary Bauer, again, thanks so much for being a part of the Value Voter Summit. Always great to sit down and talk with you.
Great to be with you, Tony, as always.
And folks, I want to encourage you to take the challenge, to pray, vote, and stand as we move toward one of the most consequential elections in the history of our republic.